Growing up, my parents had one unspoken rule. If my younger sister Madison wanted something, she got it. If I wanted the exact same thing, I was told to earn it myself. I used to think every family was like that. It wasn't until I became an adult that I realized how different we were. My name is Emily, I'm 35, and I grew up in a small suburb outside Seattle. My parents weren't poor, they weren't rich either. We lived comfortably. The problem was never money, the problem was favoritism. Madison was 4 years younger than me, and from the day she was born, she became the center of everyone's universe. When she wanted piano lessons, she got them. When I wanted to join the school art club, my dad looked at me and said, "You're smart enough to figure something out." When Madison turned 16, my parents bought her a brand new Honda Civic. On my 16th birthday, my dad handed me a newspaper. There were plenty of part-time jobs hiring. I still remember forcing a smile. That was the moment I stopped asking for things. Instead, I started working. By 15, I was babysitting every weekend. At 16, I worked in a grocery store after school. By college, I had 2 jobs while Madison's tuition was being paid by our parents. Whenever I brought it up, my mom always had the same answer. "Emily, you're independent." At first, I took it as a compliment. Later, I realized it was just an excuse. Independent meant they didn't have to help me. Meanwhile, Madison always had a reason she needed saving: rent, car payments, college books, vacation money. Somehow, my parents always found a way. After graduation, I got a job at a small consulting firm in downtown Seattle. The pay wasn't great, but I learned everything I could. Most of my coworkers left at 5. I stayed until 8, sometimes later. 5 years passed like that. Then one afternoon, my boss took credit for a project I'd spent 6 months building. That night, instead of crying, I started writing a business plan. 6 months later, I quit. Everyone told me I was making the biggest mistake of my life, especially my parents. My dad actually laughed. "Consulting company? You? Good luck." Madison didn't even pretend to support me. She smiled and said, "Don't come asking Mom and Dad for money when it fails." I never did. I rented the smallest office I could find, bought secondhand furniture, worked 7 days a week for almost 2 years. I barely made enough to pay myself. There were nights I slept on the office couch because driving home felt like wasting time. Most people would have quit. I couldn't, because failing would have proved my family right, and I refused to give them that satisfaction. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. That Tuesday started like any other. I was sitting in my tiny office reviewing reports when my phone rang. It was one of my biggest clients. At first, I thought something was wrong. Instead, he said something that completely changed my life. "Emily, we're ready to buy your company." I honestly thought he was joking. He wasn't. For the next 6 months, lawyers, accountants, and investors filled my calendar. I barely slept. I barely ate. I couldn't tell anyone because of confidentiality agreements. So while the biggest opportunity of my life was happening, my family had no idea. Not that they would have cared anyway. Every conversation still revolved around Madison. Madison needed help paying for a vacation. Madison wanted to renovate her kitchen. Madison was thinking about buying a bigger house. One Sunday, I visited my parents for dinner. I made the mistake of mentioning that work had been stressful. Before I could finish my sentence, Madison interrupted. "Oh, please, try raising 2 kids. My mom immediately nodded. "She's right. You don't know real stress yet." I almost laughed. At that point, I was negotiating a multi-million-dollar acquisition, but apparently, my problems still didn't count. As usual. A few months later, the deal finally closed. The wire transfer hit my account on a Thursday morning. I remember staring at my laptop screen in complete silence. Then I checked the number again, and again, and again. Because it didn't feel real. After taxes and everything else, I was worth just over $18 million. $18 million. The girl who used to work double shifts at a grocery store suddenly had more money than she'd ever imagined. And nobody knew. Not my parents, not Madison, Not even most of my friends. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't buy a sports car. I didn't post motivational quotes online. I kept driving my Toyota. I stayed in the same house. I kept living exactly the same way, mostly because I didn't want money changing the way people treated me. Turns out, I didn't get a choice. 3 months later, my parents hosted their annual summer barbecue. The entire family showed up. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, about 30 people altogether. I almost skipped it. Something told me I'd regret going. Unfortunately, I ignored that feeling. For the first couple of hours, everything seemed normal. People talked about sports, kids ran around the backyard, my uncle burned hamburgers like he did every single year. Then my phone rang. It was my CFO. Normally, I would have ignored it, but I was waiting for an important update, so I stepped away from the crowd and answered. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. I thought nobody could hear me. I was wrong. When I turned around, my cousin Jake was standing behind me, and the expression on his face immediately told me something was wrong. "You sold your company?" he asked. I froze. "Excuse me? I heard you talking." My stomach dropped. A few relatives looked over, then a few more. "What company? Wait, Emily owns a company? How much did you sell it for?" Within seconds, everybody was listening. I should have lied. I should have changed the subject. Instead, I made the mistake of telling the truth, and that was the moment the entire atmosphere changed. The silence lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. 18 million? You're kidding. Since when? My mom was the first to reach me. She grabbed my arm and smiled wider than I'd seen in years. "Emily, why didn't you tell us?" I almost laughed, because for the first time in my life, she sounded interested in me. "I didn't think it mattered." "Oh, sweetheart," she said. "Of course it matters. We're family." Family. That word suddenly had a very different meaning. My dad walked over with a fresh beer. "So, this company of yours really took off?" "It did." He nodded proudly, as if he'd always believed in me. "See? I always knew you'd do well." No, he didn't. The last thing he'd said about my business was that it would fail within a year. Then Madison joined the conversation. She forced a smile, but I could already see the jealousy in her eyes. "So, you're basically rich now?" "I've done well." She laughed. "Come on, Emily, you have $18 million. You don't have to be humble." I could feel everyone staring at me. My uncle whistled. "Must be nice." Then my aunt spoke. "You know, your cousin Tyler is drowning in student loans." Before I could answer, my mom chimed in. "And Madison's been struggling with the mortgage." Madison looked down, pretending to be embarrassed. I wasn't going to say anything. Of course she wasn't. She knew someone else would. Then my father cleared his throat. "Emily, you've always been responsible." I already knew where this was going. "You've been blessed," he continued, "and when you're blessed, you help your family." There it was. Not one congratulations. Not one, "We're proud of you." Just expectations. I looked around the backyard. Every face was watching me, waiting, calculating. My uncle spoke first. "I only need 30 grand to get my business back on track." My aunt wasn't far behind. "My roof needs replacing." Then Madison finally said it. "If you paid off our mortgage," she smiled, "you probably wouldn't even notice the money was gone." I stared at her. She actually believed that. "I worked 15 years to build my company," I said quietly. Madison shrugged. And nobody helped me." My mother's smile disappeared. "That's different." "How?" "Because you never needed help." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I needed help all the time. Nobody answered, because they all knew it was true. I worked 2 jobs through college. I paid every bill myself. I built everything from nothing, while Madison had been handed opportunity after opportunity. And somehow, I was the selfish one. That's when my dad looked me straight in the eyes and said something I'll never forget. Don't let money change who you are. I almost smiled. Money hadn't changed me. It had simply revealed everyone else. The barbecue was over after that, at least for me. I grabbed my keys and was halfway to my car when my mom stopped me. Emily, wait. I turned around. She looked almost offended. You're leaving? I think it's time. We weren't finished talking. No, I said calmly. You were finished asking. Her smile disappeared. Nobody's asking for a handout. I raised an eyebrow. Really? She hesitated. We're just saying, family helps family. I looked back toward the yard. Madison was already watching us from the patio. So, where was my family when I worked 2 jobs in college? I asked. Mom crossed her arms. That was different. When Dad laughed at my business idea? Silence. When I couldn't afford my first apartment? Nothing. When I spent years working weekends while Madison got everything handed to her? She sighed dramatically. Oh, Emily, you're still holding on to childhood? No. I shook my head. I'm remembering it. Before she could answer, my dad walked over. He didn't even try to hide his frustration. You've changed. I actually laughed. I have? Money made you cold. No, it made you selfish. That one almost hurt. Almost. Because deep down, I knew exactly what was happening. The daughter they ignored for decades had suddenly become valuable. Not because of who I was, because of what I had. Then Madison joined us. She folded her arms and looked at me like I owed her something. You know, I would have helped you if our situations were reversed. I looked at her for a few seconds. No, you wouldn't. Her face changed instantly. What does that mean? It means you've never helped me once in your life. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, because she couldn't think of a single example. Instead, she tried a different approach. You don't need $18 million. I smiled politely. And you don't need my money? That was the moment everything exploded. She started yelling, calling me greedy, saying I'd forgotten where I came from. My aunt joined in, then my uncle. Within seconds, everyone had an opinion about how I should spend the money I'd earned. No one asked what I wanted. No one asked how hard I'd worked. To them, my success had become community property. I quietly opened my car door. My dad shouted one last thing before I got in. If you walk away now, don't expect this family to be here for you. I looked at him through the open window, then I smiled. You haven't been here for me in 20 years. I closed the door and drove away. My phone started ringing before I even reached the highway. Mom, Dad, Madison. Then texts. Can we talk? You misunderstood us. Family shouldn't fight over money. By the time I got home, there were 19 missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I blocked every number for the first time in my life. The silence felt peaceful. The next morning, I woke up to 34 unread messages. Most of them started the same way. Emily, we're sorry if... Not, we're sorry. We're sorry if you felt if there was a difference. No one apologized for how they'd treated me growing up. They apologized because I'd said no. Around noon, Madison called me from a different number. Against my better judgment, I answered, Emily, can we please talk? I'm listening. She sighed. I think everyone's emotions just got out of control yesterday. Did they? Yeah, Mom cried all night. I stayed silent. Then she finally asked the question she'd been calling about. So, have you thought about helping us with the house? There it was. Less than a minute into the conversation. Not, how are you? Not, can we fix our relationship? Just money. Madison, I said calmly, is that the only reason you called? She didn't answer. I already knew. I have to go. Wait, I hung up. That afternoon, I met with my attorney. Not because I was afraid someone would sue me, because I wanted a clean break. A week later, I sold my house. 2 weeks after that, I moved to Boston to open a second office. I didn't tell my family where I was going. They found out through social media months later. Eventually, the calls stopped. The texts stopped. Even the guilt trips stopped. It turned out that once people realized they weren't getting money, they also stopped pretending to care. About a year later, I heard through an old family friend that Madison had lost the house. My parents had to help her move into a smaller apartment. For a moment, I actually felt sad. Not because I regretted my decision, because I realized nothing had changed. They were still rescuing her, still treating her like she couldn't stand on her own. Some people never learn. As for me, life became surprisingly peaceful. My company kept growing. I hired more employees. I started a scholarship fund for students who couldn't afford college. Not because anyone asked me to, because I wanted to. That's the difference. Helping someone should be a choice, not an obligation. Sometimes people ask if I regret cutting off my family. The answer is no. I don't hate them. I simply accepted something I'd avoided for years. We weren't a family. We were just people who happened to share the same last name. And the day they discovered I was a millionaire, they didn't reveal who I had become. They revealed who they had always been. Looking back, I think my father was right about one thing. Money really does change people. Not the person who earns it, the people who suddenly believe they're entitled to it. And honestly, walking away wasn't the hardest decision I ever made. It was the healthiest one. The end.